I was going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I saw that. I saw that I could just pull it over here if I wanted it.
Yep.
Hey.
1 second, and then I need to.
I'm going to casually begin
Okay.
because there's a lot to cover tonight, and I want to do our due diligence. So I'll say some preliminary stuff as folks put gathering in, and that way so I can casually check the boxes. So the first thing is I handed out. I passed out.
There you go.
There we go. This little handout. This is from a Bible almanac that actually was Pastor Ensook's, and so I thought it was a great article. It's not super scholarly. It's also like 5 to 6 pages. It's really nice. I have found, and this is someone who studied this, that I always have a better time understanding something if I know the context before and if I know the context after.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I feel like everybody, if you gone to church, you might know like Abraham and Moses and the Old Testament stuff. You're like, got it, check. Yeah, I know those were in the Old Testament. And then we start talking about like the church and Paul and the disciples. We're like, yeah, the disciples. But if I ask you like what happened 10 years before Jesus, most of us are kind of like, well, not a whole lot in the Bible on that. And that's the truth. There's not. So what we're talking about when we think about the context before the Gospels of Mark, is like the intertestament period and the Second Temple Judaism period. That's what they call it. I should double check my notes. I got a final page of this too. It's always helpful to, the Second Temple era is what this handout calls it. So like, you're gonna find names in here like Mark Antony is like, yes, that one. Like Julius Caesar, yes, that one. Like Cleopatra, yes, that one. Those are like the people, kind of like that. During a revolution that happens called like the Maccabeans.
Yeah.
And that's what Hanukkah is based off of. So all that stuff kind of spurs and happens in, like, I'll say Israel, even though that's not what it's called, right? They would call it like Palestine or Syria or Judea, or they call it by its Roman name. So all those things are happening then. So I found that this stuff is helpful. Feel free to read it at your leisure. You don't have to. If it's not for you, you're not going to hurt my feelings because I didn't write it. So, all good. Let me see if there's any other housekeeping. I think that's about it. We are on Mark chapter 6 tonight. I'm going to double check my stream out of some anxiety that I did not click the right thing. And apparently my Chrome protection alert. If that goes off, you'll just holler at me. Okay, it's good. All right, so shall we hop in? Very good. All right, a short summary so far. Would anyone like to give it a shot? Mark 1. John the Baptist, and Jesus baptized, and Jesus tempted, and he calls a couple disciples. We're doing pretty good. Mark 2.
Ditto.
Jesus heals, and then he gets into some trouble. So there's some debating. Right? Mark chapter 3. I remember the disciples are named there. Okay, Mark chapter 4. If I had to guess.
That's when they get into the parables.
Yes, there's teaching. Calming of the storm in chapter 5, I think, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And the healing of the demon-possessed guy in chapter 5. See? We're internalizing some of this. We didn't even need that slide.
We could memorize.
You can delete it, right? So, how'd we do? Yeah, John the Baptist, baptized, tempted, calls. Jesus heals, debates. Jesus heals, debates, points 12. Mark 4, teaches and calms the storm. So that's where it calms the storm in 4. I think I said 5, so I was wrong. I'm making sure we're checking here. And then Jesus exorcises demons and heals in chapter 5.
Yeah.
And then we're on chapter 6. There's 16 chapters total in Mark. So we're moving at a pretty good clip. And before we know it, we're going to be done, which is going to shock me. And then we'll, choose something else to chew on for a little bit. All right, before we answer this question, let's have a word of prayer and then we'll hop in. Gracious God, we gather again this week to work through another chapter of the Gospel of Mark. So I pray that as we wrestle with the text, that you would meet us there, that these words would become fresh, they'd be new, they'd be annoying at times, they'd be frustrating in a way that transforms our reading and transforms ultimately our hearts and minds. We pray this all in your Son's name. Amen. Okay. So what motifs have you seen so far that are emerging in Mark? I do not have another slide after this with the answers, by the way. Look, see, no answers. Just asking you.
What's a motif, a sign?
A motif is like this recurring theme, or a sign, or these things that kind of keep popping up over and over and over again.
Healing and trouble, healing and trouble.
Okay, healing and trouble. Yes, that is a motif. This kind of rhythm of Jesus' ministry, right? This public ministry, and then he gets into some issues, and then private ministry. Healing and trouble. What else?
Parables.
The parables.
That's,
He's with people and by himself. And with
Yes.
people and by himself.
And we'll see that again in this chapter, right? The public sphere and then the lonely place.
mhm.
Good eyes, good eyes. What else?
The apostles don't know him yet.
That's right. Yeah.
That's a good answer.
The apostles do not know him yet. And in this chapter, too, it's going to get more complicated even. We'll find some verses that are going to talk about how even their hearts are hardened. What else?
Aren't the Pharisees still building a case?
Yeah, and I think they're kind of working behind the scenes, right? It's been a couple chapters, I'll put that in quotations, since we've had a dedicated conflict with the Pharisees. It began very early. I think chapter 3 is when they begin to plot against him, or they seek to destroy him. So it's been a little bit of a hot minute, but I think it's still in the background. We have this motif of like the demons know who he is, the disciples don't. And when he heals somebody or does something, he usually tells them,
Don't
shh,
say.
don't tell anybody, don't say anything.
Unless they're Jews or.
Sorry? Unless they're Gentile, and then he gives them the opposite, which is very interesting. Okay, so if we come up with more, great. We'll circle back. It's okay. It's like a big spiral. We just keep revisiting some things every now and then. So previously on Mark chapter 5, verses 42 and 43, it says, immediately the girl stood up and began to walk about. She was 12 years of age.
That's right.
At this they were overcome with amazement. He strictly ordered them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. There's always eating in these Gospels.
They were probably Methodists.
They were probably Methodists. That's right, yeah. So Mark chapter 6, 1 through 6. Is it okay if I read for y'all? Good. He left that place and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. On the Sabbath he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astounded. They said, where did this man get all this? What is this wisdom that has been given to him? What deeds of power are being done by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James, and Joseph, and Judas, and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. Then Jesus said to them, prophets are not without honor, except in their hometown, and among their own kin, and in their own house. And he could do no deed of power there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and cured them. And he was amazed at their unbelief. So this passage, right, is the rejection of Jesus in his hometown of Nazareth. That's that first section, and I'm going to drill down for a second on everyone's favorite topic, geography. So there are 5 main regions so far in the Gospel of Mark that we have talked about, and I want to make sure that we hit all of these. The first is his hometown, which is Nazareth. That's kind of where he was like raised. Of course, he was born in Bethlehem, and he seems to have a home base, according to the Gospels, in what other city? Capernaum, which is on the north side, it's on the north side, right here, of the Sea of Galilee. Now this is north, nod your head, you're with me.
Yes.
This is the Mediterranean Sea over here. Italy, the nice place to vacation, it's over that way,
Yeah.
right? Sea of Galilee and then the Jordan River and the Dead Sea's down here, and Jerusalem is down here, and Judea in this area. So, we've seen this map a couple times before, but I think it's important just to name a couple of these because some of these places are going to come up very soon, and also the people that live in these areas are important. So, the New Testament Galilee is comprised of the hill country, and this is where Joshua, the best name in the Bible, right? He divides the land between the tribes of Asher, Zebulun, Issachar, and Naphtali. So remember with clarity that when they land in this area, it's the promised land and that it's given to the tribes. So it's sort of divided up. So Judea is given to the tribe of Judah, in the name, and Benjamin. Benjamin was the largest tribe of Israel. And so that area historically was ruled by those people. The Decapolis is a federation of 10 towns. We've talked about this, right? Does it sound vaguely familiar? A federation of 10 towns, mostly Greek culture, thus the name Decapolis, and not 10 Jewish cities, right? It's the Decapolis. And those areas are there. Jesus has already gone to that area. That's where they think the healing of the man with all the demons says, my name is Legion. That's where we think that took place, in that area. Although it could have taken place in another area, the Tetrarchy of Philip. That just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
That hurt.
So the Tetrarchy of Philip, Philip is one of Herod's sons. Now to make these complicated tonight, we're going to talk about Herod a little bit, because Herod is like, he's the king, and then there was a Herod the Great, and then there's he's Herod the Builder, and then he has Herod that's a son, and then there's a Herod grandchild, and then there's a Herodias, which is a daughter and a wife. It gets complicated. We'll get there later. And then there's Syria. That's the one over there that borders the Mediterranean Sea. It was a Roman province, and it includes Palestine. The interesting thing about Syria is one of the key cities in that is Damascus. And so we will recall that's where Paul is heading when he has the encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus. So he's in Syria, in that area. And then there's Galilee, which I think we talked a little bit about already. That's where Nazareth is, in that area. Okay, doing okay? I got some other things, but we'll leave it on the cutting room floor. All right. Let me make sure. We're going to go back a little bit. So you'll notice that their question is, where did Jesus get all of this information? They're not super concerned with, like, the meaning of what he's saying. They're more concerned about his authority.
He was born with it.
He was born with it, right? And in some other Gospels, there's clear lineage and delineation to show the authority of Christ. Well, remember that Mark does not begin with the genealogy. That's Matthew's story, and that's Luke's story. Mark is right into the action. Boom, 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 boom. And there it goes. Interestingly enough, verse 3 says, is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary?
Yeah.
This is the only place in all the Bible, except for Matthew, where it says at one time that Jesus was a carpenter. I didn't know that. So, like, we all know, oh yeah, Jesus is a carpenter. It was really no, there's only 2 verses in the entire Bible that say Jesus was a carpenter. One in Mark and one in Matthew. And interestingly enough, too, you would think that Jesus uses a lot of construction parables or building parables, but he does not. There's only, like, the man who builds his house on this firm foundation. It's like the only parable about building, basically. The rest are about, yeast and farm animals and coins and stuff like that. So that was interesting. This idea of them taking offense at him, it really means that they stumbled at the idea of him. That he... It's like they know so much...
Brother?
What?
Can he be our brother?
Right. They know so much about him that they're so familiar with him that they are not allowed sort of a new revelation of Jesus. And then, interestingly enough, all the names of Jesus, of his siblings, are listed here. So I did a little bit of a dive on this, because I'm kind of a nerd. I was just kind of checking it out. So, James, the brother of James, Jesus is the brother of James. Some people, let me start over. Now, some people will say this is important because it'll show you that Mary and Joseph had other kids, right? When a man loves a woman, right, they make babies. And so Mary and Joseph had other kids, and so they'd be half brother and sister to Jesus. Our Catholic brothers and sisters would say this is important because these kids are probably from another marriage. And they would maintain that Mary was a virgin all the way through her life. Just so we know, this is an interesting theological debate. So, the other books of the Bible that we know, right? James in the New Testament is attributed to this James, the brother of Jesus. And Jude is also known as Judas. So Judas and Jude are the same word depending on if you're translating out of Greek or you're following which manuscript. So the book of Jude is also attributed to a half-brother of Jesus, which I think I might have forgotten. So that was pretty interesting, right? We have a good list of Jesus' siblings listed here, and then our Catholic brothers and sisters would say these are Joseph's children, not Mary's. And Mark is telling you that his lineage is not argued about, right? He's the son of Mary and the brother of these people. So from Mark's perspective, I would say Mark thinks that they're all in the same lot together. You'll also notice that those are all very faithful names in terms of Jewish custom and culture, which would reflect the high standing, most likely, that Jesus' family comes from. Right? It's like when anyone married their Catholic relatives. So my wife's family was Catholic, and all their names are Michael Joseph Durbin, Joshua, Michael, and Joseph. Like they're Catholic names, right? In the same way, these are all Jewish names. It's a very Jewish family. I thought that was interesting. All right, let me see if I got anything else on this passage. I was struck by the very, very last phrase. He was amazed at their unbelief. I wonder what parallels this has to the parable of the sower that we've already encountered in the Gospel of Mark. And here he is in Nazareth, and he's...
There's some of the ones that's fallen on
rocky ground.
rocky ground.
It seems...
They hear it and nothing happens.
Yeah. You all might disagree with me, but there are times when I can almost hear the irritation of the Messiah. Especially in Mark. I think there are times when he is frustrated. And it's interesting because we don't have tone of voice in text. You know what I mean? So, Jesus says to them, prophets are not without honor. I don't know. I think he's irritated.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
This is always kind of, I don't know, just jumped out at me, especially in that particular one. So he could do no deed of power there, except heal a few people.
Right?
I mean, that's pretty miraculous.
Yeah.
So why isn't that, why is it downplayed there, kind of?
So
He could do no
yeah.
powerful thing there. Oh, but he healed people.
So I wanted to capture more of that in this, and I'll see if I can find more for next week. There was sort of like this air of expectancy of messiahs.
Yeah.
And there were miracle workers in the Greek culture at the time, these people who would be able to heal and perform miracles. And so I want to say that Mark is trying to differentiate.
Yeah.
He's not just another miracle worker. He's more than that. He does that. And so if I'm reading this for the first time, if I'm a first century Jew reading this or a first century Christian, I'm going to say, oh, deeds of power. Yeah, of course, all great people do deeds of power. But is it more than that? I don't know. Mark is going to have us wrestle with the concept that miracles do not lead to faith. Right? The disciples are going to be a part of a miracle in a little bit. The disciples have already been a part. They've already seen these miracles. And they still aren't quite sure who this guy is. So Mark's playing around with this idea of like these deeds of powers and these signs and miracles and how they parallel and run alongside faith. So yeah, I would say that is pretty impressive. But apparently for Mark it's like, that was it. It could have been so much more, right? Any other thoughts about 1 through 6? All right. Then he went among the villages teaching. He called the 12 and began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over the unclean spirits. He ordered them to take nothing for their journey except a staff. No bread, no bag, no money in their belts, but to wear sandals and not to put on two tunics. He said to them, wherever you enter a house, stay there until you leave the place. If any place will not welcome you and they refuse to hear you as you leave, shake off the dust that's on your feet as a testimony against them. So they went out and proclaimed that all should repent. They cast out many demons and anointed with oil many who were sick and cured them. So this is the sending out of the disciples 2 by 2. I call it the disciples' mission trip. Right? Jesus is the youth pastor. He's packed up the bus. Right? He's driven down to the place they're going, and he says, all right, kiddos, we're here. Everyone off the bus. Now go and do. So, what do you notice about the disciples in that mission trip? Yeah, he doesn't send them out one by, like solo, right? They have support system.
But they went out on faith that they would be fed and clothed. That they would be fed and clothed.
Yeah, so notice some Old Testament parallels. Maybe you can hear the journey of the Passover into the wilderness, right? They're told, like, we are leaving Egypt, and we are leaving Egypt now, right? Let's go. And then in Exodus, it talks about what they should take with them. The items are pretty similar. Mark is echoing some of that Exodus journey. What else? Did you notice that they're pretty practical things? Sandal,
Yeah.
take one tunic, don't take four. Take a
Staff.
walking staff.
Yeah.
No bread, no money.
Yeah. They're to depend on the community that they go to for their livelihood,
Sustenance.
for their sustenance. There are some theologians who will make grandiose claims about each of these items. Oh, the staff is a symbol of authority, and the money in the belt is this. And then other commentators just say, no, these are just everyday items. They just need to take some stuff. So you be the judge on that
Because the
interpretation.
second time they go out, he says, take this and take this and take this.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So King Herod heard of it, for Jesus' name had become known. Some were saying, John the Baptizer has been raised from the dead, and for this reason these powers are at work in him. But others said, it is Elijah. And others said, it is a prophet, like one of the prophets of old. But when Herod heard of it, he said, John, whom I beheaded, has been raised. Whoa. John's dead? Like last we knew, right, John had been imprisoned. Apparently he's dead. Must have died somewhere between chapter 3? Can we find that? Where was he taken into custody? Do we remember when or where? Ooh, I don't think I do.
No.
All right.
Remember why he was killed.
Something to drill down on. All right, so he is taken into custody at some point in time. Maybe someone will find it. And then apparently he died between there. So we're going to talk about that. But why do they think maybe he is Elijah? This is a big question. By a big question, I mean I had to look it up.
Why is he like Elijah? Because Elijah was a prophet,
Okay, Elijah was a prophet.
and they think he's a prophet.
They think he's a prophet, or like a prophet. And this is like, you get into that sort of simile metaphor language. There was an expectation. So when they do the Seder meal, I'm talking about our Jewish brothers and sisters. Do you all know this? That they leave a chair empty for somebody? Any guesses? It's Elijah. They leave it for Elijah. Okay, so, and then there was a couple people who never tasted death in the Old Testament. One of them was Elijah. How did Elijah disappear?
In a big chariot.
Yeah, a big chariot of fire, right? And so Elijah has this ministry. It is very powerful. He is a prophet. He's the guy who goes into the wilderness and is taken care of by angels. Like, lots of parallels here. And so some people think that Jesus is like Elijah. So if you wanted to, and I'll provide this for you in the coming weeks as I find more on it. There is this expectation that someone like Elijah will come back. And there are other interpretations that the person who comes back is Elijah. And so that's why Herod probably thinks that Jesus either is like Elijah or is Elijah. And so he's going to be here. That's what people even thought maybe John the Baptist was. This discussion about this Messiah, this Elijah figure who's going to come back as a prophet for the days of the Lord.
John went to prison just before he called the 12.
Okay,
The 12.
chapter
1.
1 at the very end.
Yeah.
And right before he called the first disciples.
Poor guy's been languishing
After
in
John
the
After
dungeon.
John was put in prison, and then he named his 12.
Okay, thank you. So, I'm going to keep moving because there'll be a big chunk here on Herod. We're going to talk about that for a while, and I got some great pictures to talk about this family and where they're at. So Herod himself had sent men who arrested John, bound him, and put him in prison on account of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. His brother Philip. Okay. Because Herod had married her. For John had been telling Herod, it's not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. Isn't that ironic, though?
They're supposed to, I thought Jews were supposed
I know. Isn't...
Somebody went dead there or something.
Well, you're not supposed to kill him, but kill him.
So...
David did that too.
Yeah, so Herod was not the most upright person. That whole family, mostly gained their power through assassinations. And so if I assassinate kind of all my brothers who are political threats, and then I take their wives, naughty. You're not really, doing the live right thing. Also, they were not entirely Jewish.
No, that's true.
They are related to a different branch of the Abraham tree, the Edomites.
Yeah.
And so they are descendants of Esau.
Esau.
Okay. See some glazed over looks. We'll keep going. We'll just massage it a little bit. We're good. So this is Herod's family tree. I'm going to step over here. So I'm going to just a little bit. So it says Herod the Great. This is the Herod probably in Matthew, the slaughtering of the innocents. Do y'all know this story? Right? Where Herod is like, the wise men, the ruler, I got to kill my, opponent king. So he kills all the babies. Very reminiscent of Pharaoh slaughtering the babies in Egypt. Do you hear the echoes in the stories here? That's this guy. And then he's got some relationships. There are 4 women listed here. He married 10. So if I was to show you the family tree, we would be here for hours on end, and you would just be like, I don't get it. And I'd say, yeah, me either. And so here are some that he married. This is the first generation, the second generation, and the third generation. And the one that really plays into impact is this woman named Salome. This is the daughter of Herodias. Herodias was the wife of Herod Philip, not to be confused with Herod the Great. And Herod Philip is Philip the Tetrarch in that land that he rules. Clear as mud, huh? All right? Good? So it's pretty branching, and then it dead ends abruptly because that's an assassination. And then he takes some power over here and marries somebody else. So in summary, Herod is from the Edomites, and he is sympathetic to the Romans. So on that thing that I handed out to you about the intertestamental period, I'm just going to point you to where it talks about it, and then we can move on with our lives. There it goes. This is on page 337, the Roman period. Herod soon proved himself eager to do Rome's bidding and brutally suppressed Jewish attempts to assert independence. That's that guy. You can read up from there. He's not really beloved by anybody in Israel. So we do know, we're going to read this portion here, and then we'll go into talking about the family a little bit more and some stuff. So, this is the narrative, right?
Is that the Herod that built Caesarea? Or is that a different Herod?
Herod the Great was the builder. He's the guy who builds everything. And then Herod's family lives in all of Herod's buildings. Just to make it a little confusing. So Herodias had a grudge against him and wanted to kill him. This is him being John the Baptist.
Right.
Now Mark is narrating for us. Interestingly enough, too, this is a major section of Mark that's not really about Jesus. The rest of the gospel, right, is all about Jesus, the disciples in the ministry, and this is sort of an excursus, or an aside, or just a little bit of footnotes.
And by the way.
Yeah, by the way, you should know the story. Because everyone's like, wasn't he in prison? Oh, he's dead. Okay, but she could not, for Herod feared John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man, and he protected him. When he heard him, he was greatly perplexed, and yet he liked to listen to him. Sounds like my preaching, right? Greatly perplexed. I don't get it. Right, but an opportunity came when Herod, on his birthday, gave a banquet for his courtiers and officers and for the leaders of Galilee. When his daughter, Herodias, came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his guests, and the king said to the girl, "Ask me for whatever you wish, and I'll give it." And he swore to her, "Whatever you ask me, I will give you, even half of my kingdom." She went out and said to her mother, "What should I ask for?" And she replied, "The head of John the Baptizer." Immediately she rushed back to the king and requested, "I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter." The king was deeply grieved, yet out of regard for his oaths and for the guests, he did not want to refuse her. Immediately, right, Mark's favorite word, the king sent a soldier of the guard with orders to bring John's head. He went and beheaded him in prison, brought his head on a platter, and gave it to the girl. And the girl gave it to her mother. When his disciples heard about it, his being John the Baptist, they came and took his body and laid it in a tomb. Does that sound familiar? That last bit, right? Maybe some foreshadowing happening here.
They were cousins.
They were cousins, and let's not forget that familial relationship as well. So there's that happening. So Herodian architecture still exists. You can go visit it today. This is stuff that they built, still around. Pretty amazing. This is the only Herodian architecture still around, and this is the enclosure of the cave of the patriarchs at Hebron in Jerusalem. So this is a enclosure around what people believe to be the tomb of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's pretty cool, pretty interesting. So it's a really important religious site for at least Jews, Muslims, and Christians. This is probably where John the Baptist died. This little hill. You see this is far off, so in the back, this is the Dead Sea in the background right here. And you'll see these little columns sticking up right here. This would have been, let me get my notes right. This would have been the familial palace at Maccareus. This is a reconstruction over here on the right. So you see the tall towers here. This would be the palace proper, or the courtyard right here. This would have been, I'm not sure. I have to double check what it says over here. But this would be another building. You can see the walls skirting it. So you also notice that its location is on top of a hill. So it's a palace, it's a fort. You need to be on top of these hills for military reasons, so you could see the enemy coming, you could defend, it'd be appropriate. And this is what it looks like to this day. So this is the ruins left over in this area. So this is probably where John the Baptist died. He's not buried here. And this is the problem, or the funny thing about the Promised Land, is they all got little tombs that say, "Oh, we believe that so-and-so's buried here. Will you please donate to help with the tomb?" And so they have all these spaces. And of course, this happened a long, long time ago. No one knows with any certainty where John the Baptist is buried, but we do know that this was Herod's familial palace, and so this is probably the point and place of his execution. Whew!
That's interesting.
Moving on, doing good? All right, the apostles. Did you hear language switch?
Yeah. we
That's
don't have
interesting.
disciples anymore.
Yeah. No, we'll go back and forth. I just thought that was interesting. The apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all they had done and taught. Right? He just sent them on a mission trip. We just had a little bit of a flashback to what happened to John the Baptist. And now they're back here. So the apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all they had done and taught. And he said to them, "Come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in the boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they hurried there on foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them. I'm just going to pause. All right, so the Sea of Galilee, we've talked about how big it is. And I forget the exact dimensions, if it's 6 or 16 or whatever. You can see across it. So you can just picture, like, the disciples and Jesus are crisscrossing the sea. They're going to all these towns, doing all this ministry. And then they get in one, and Jesus is like, "Y'all seem to be pretty tuckered out. Let's go to the other side." So they get in the boat, and then you can just picture everyone's like, "They're going over there. Go over there." And so they just run around the sea. It's pretty interesting. As he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. Verse 35, when it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now very late. Send them away so that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy something for themselves to eat." But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." They said to him, "Are we to go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?" And he said to them, "How many loaves have you? Go and see." When they had found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then he ordered them to get all the people to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to his disciples to set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all. And all ate and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. Those who had eaten the loaves numbered 5,000 men. All right, what do you notice about this event? I've preached on it before. It's okay if you don't remember my sermon. I'm not upset. I'm just curious. What are the things that you notice with fresh eyes? I'll go back to this text about this event. This is the feeding of the 5,000. It is one of the events of Jesus' life that's recorded in all the Gospels. So what are some things that jump out to you about this?
He took pity on them.
Sorry?
He took pity on them.
Yeah, the word is compassion, right? Which is different because the disciples don't.
Yeah.
This is the point which he told the disciples to take care of it.
Yeah. So they are entrusted with the ministry, and they're not even aware, right, that they're going to be involved in a miracle until probably like halfway through. When they're handing stuff out and they're like, "Piece of bread for you, piece of bread." We don't very much piece of bread for you. More bread here, piece of bread. Yeah, they're
Body
like,
of Christ.
what is going on? Oh, no, you are exactly right. I don't know if y'all heard what Missy said. She said, "Body of Christ broken for you." So do you hear almost this Eucharistic language, right? He took the bread. He broke it. See, Mark's not dumb. What else do you notice about it?
Wonder how they got them to sit in groups of 50 and 100.
Yeah, isn't that a cute little detail or a fun little detail?
Wow.
Very
They
orderly.
count on to sit down or what?
Right.
A few other small tidbits, right? How much do they have left over?
12 baskets.
12 baskets. How many apostles or disciples are there? 12, right? This number's important. It's come up a lot already in Mark. So 1 basket for each apostle. They get leftovers.
Didn't he say before that it wasn't just men? He was also feeding women and children there.
Yeah, and so the very last verse in Mark, or verse 44, says, "Those who had eaten the loaves numbered 5,000 men." And so
So there was about 10,000.
10,000, right? And then the kids.
When you pictured them running around the sea, I thought of the airplanes that picked people up in Afghanistan.
Oh, and just the mobbing
And they
them.
ran out there and they didn't have on blue jeans. They had on long gowns, long
Yeah.
robes.
Yeah. Anything else?
So they can run up a robe.
Absolutely. Yeah, So, there's some interesting things about running in robes, especially in this ancient world. Running is not a dignified act.
Yeah.
It would be shameful. And we've talked about this interplay that's behind the text, right? There is an honor and shame in this ancient world. And so oftentimes, the goal, this is the currency. It'd be like prestige in today's economy, or maybe social standing. I'm trying to think of another equivalent. But you want to avoid the shameful things. So, small examples, like being nailed to a tree and crucified, right, is a cursed thing in the book of Leviticus, and a very shameful act. You would not want that, because every depiction you've ever seen of a crucified Jesus is wrong. Because Jesus was naked. They crucified people naked. Because it was not just like, let's kill him. It was like, let's make this as horrific and shameful as possible to make an example of them. And so when they're running, right, they're hurrying around the fields, they're moving around. It says they hurried up there on foot. Like they are tripping over themselves. And this is not something you do.
They wanna be
There's
first.
no dignity there. They are desperate. They are desperate. Some of that stuff's hard to pick up in the text because, again, it's a different culture and time and place. But there's this honor and shame parallel. Okay. We're going to keep on keeping on. Anything else you notice about the event? That's the still from The Chosen, by the way, which I think some of you mentioned a couple times. So,
I thought it looked familiar.
yeah.
Man, that looks familiar. Why?
Okay, we have a few more. It's a big chapter, so there's a lot happening, and I think we'll probably end on time, hopefully, unless I keep talking. But we will walk through this, and then we'll just circle back a little bit and see if we can encapsulate what happens in Mark 6 and where it is in the journey so far. Immediately, Mark's favorite word, all right?
Yep.
He made his disciples get into the boat, and I'm sure they're like, I just freaking got in the boat. Now we're going to get back in the boat. He's like, get back in the boat and go on ahead to the other side, to Bethsaida. While he dismissed the crowd, after saying farewell to them, he went up on the mountain to pray. When evening came, the boat was out on the sea, and he was alone on the land. When he saw that they were straining at the oars against an adverse wind, he came toward them early in the morning, walking on the sea. He intended to pass them by. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost and cried out, for they all saw him and were terrified. But immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." Then he got into the boat with them, and the wind ceased, and they were utterly astounded. And y'all, this verse is going to mess us up.
You just say,
For they did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. Help me. Help me. And what is going on in this passage? I'm just going to show you my next slide. I thought it was really funny. Another stormy storm, right? So what do you notice about this event? Let's go back. Another stormy storm.
I like where it says he intended to pass them by going, bye.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting little throwaway verse, right? And Mark does this every now and then, right? He did this at the first time when Jesus is taken to the boat just as he was, and he's sleeping. And here, he intended to pass them by. What do you think that means? It's debated. You know, Mark doesn't tell us in parentheses, this is what I really mean. What's happening
He's
here?
testing them?
He's testing them.
Maybe? Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Mark is, faith is big
Yeah.
in Mark. Like, the disciples, do they believe in who this person is and what he can
Yeah,
do? And
they-
they've seen what he can do.
I think they go from disbelief to back and forth. I think they're going back and forth in their belief.
Yeah. So, I'm going to just riff off of your thought for a second. Oftentimes, in church world, I think, people feel like you have to have a conversion experience. You believe Jesus is your Savior, you say the sinner's prayer, and you're saved, and you're good to go, and your life is forever changed.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, that's Paul's experience,
Yeah.
right? Paul does a 180, he believes in Jesus, never looks back. And I'll tell you right now, that as I read the Gospels, it's embarrassing, but I find myself agreeing with the disciples a lot more and identifying with them a lot more. And it seems to be like these struggles of belief and doubt, and belief and doubt, and belief and doubt, and they're like cyclical in the story. Maybe you don't see it. Maybe you disagree with me.
Maybe we have the same problem.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe it's a human problem. What else do you notice about the story? Any parallels to previous stories?
Well, just that they're on the lake again.
That's another storm. So there have been two examples of Jesus calming a storm.
Mhm.
Right, one is by decree saying be still, and the waves are, and they're astonished. Right? What happens here?
He climbs in the boat and everything's cool.
Yeah, he doesn't say anything this time, right? He just gets in. And the winds stop blowing. And they're amazed.
But why were their hearts hardened after that? I go,
Come on now. Come on. Yeah.
You know, thank you, Jesus.
I mean, why did they put it together like that? Why did they say that? Why did they do that? Why did they say it that way? I mean, all this happens, and then it goes, well, their hearts were hardened. Really?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't understand whoever put this together. Why did they say that? I mean, obviously, they still don't know exactly who he is. and all
That's
that.
it.
But they keep doing this over and over again. Who is this guy? Oh, I think he's on, and I don't know. And their heart, why did they do it like this? Does that make the message clearer, better, more understandable? I don't think so.
Why do we sometimes lose our faith?
So what is hardness of heart? Let's talk about this. This is a motif, right? This is a theme in Mark. What is hardness of heart?
Like drawing the line in the sand.
Not having
That's it.
compassion for people.
Okay, compassion. You're saying the line in the sand.
That's
Sa-
it. Yeah, like that's it.
How else would you describe it?
I believe.
No belief,
Yeah.
Loss of faith.
loss of faith. So is it? Is it a spectrum? Maybe. Because I heard you say like no belief. Is it possible to have your heart hardened and still believe? Or is that like a deficit of faith, like a loss of faith? What do you think? Mark's not going to tell us. So we're going to wrestle with it.
Well,
I think it's almost a loss of expectation in a way that they were like, hey dude, you know, we're doing all this work for you, all that kind of good stuff, and then it's like, you can't just make it easy on us to cross over. So, I mean,
No, really, I think that's beautiful. I think there's some of that, right? It says that he sees that they're straining at the oars against an advanced wind. Like he can tell that they're struggling, and he plans to walk past them on by. And maybe, excuse me, this might be offensive, maybe they're pissed off about that, right? I mean, maybe the disciple. Can you hear it? I don't know. Maybe disagree with me, but I think they might be a little miffed. Like, dude.
What the heck?
Yeah, you calmed the storm just 2 chapters ago. Here we are again, and there he goes.
Well, in their eyes, they may see that Jesus has an easier life, that he gets to go through things easier, he always has an answer, can always fix it in the right moment and set in time. But they're not seeing from Jesus's eyes that he's equally having his own issues with dealing with all these people, and them constantly having a non-lasting impression of his faith, or what that he can provide and protect for them all the time.
That's interesting, right? And in this chapter alone, it begins with his rejection in Nazareth. We've already seen his family's come to collect him because they think he needs to go to the loony bin. And so he's being rejected left and right, and they have not been rejected yet, really.
Correct.
And he's walking on the water. Hey, hi Jesus, how you doing? How you walking on the water? Whoa, I mean, how does that happen? And they go, gee, he's just passing by. Wait a minute. Unless they had paddle boards back then that I remember. Here he is walking. I mean, that alone is incredible. It's like, this guy's just walking over there and by the boat on the water. That's a big deal. That's a huge deal.
Yeah.
And that's just nothing. Oh, well, he just went by and now he's coming in, getting in the boat.
And the water
So,
was rough.
let's play with this though. Like we've seen these themes again and again. Jesus does something like miraculous. He healed people in Nazareth, and they're like, I don't know.
And he fed all those people.
Maybe he's faking it, right? I mean, he casts out the demons. They go to the pigs, and then the guy's like, "Can you leave?" So there is this. Mark is playing with this idea that just because you see these miracles, it does not lead to faith.
Well, and I think we can also go all the way back into psychology, that our brains are wired to think negative and to look for negative. And so all these positive things he's doing for people, I mean, this could be just proof that all the way back into that time period, psychologically, that, they were not able to really grasp, that this is real. that you can give your life to him.
What's it gonna take?
But it's
I
no
hope so.
different than new Christians.
The answer's tough.
You know,
Yeah.
new Christians, I mean, I've witnessed to multiple new Christians over time, and, you know, it takes time for them to grasp it and to fully accept it and believe that, you know, if I let you, this person that isn't even here, that I can see and touch and feel,
Yeah.
is really going to be there for me
Yeah.
and provide for me.
It's still, they've just fed 5,000 or 10,000 people with a few fish and a couple of loaves.
Right.
And that doesn't sell the deal. Where did that come from? Well, I don't know, manna from heaven, I guess, whatever's going on. And this happens, and they're not buying this either. It's like,
Right.
wait a minute, their hearts are hardened? I'm going,
Man, you remind me of something. We'll come. So go ahead before you lose it, and then remind me about the manna from heaven. Go ahead.
Is this along the same lines of, you know, well, I'm gonna heal you, but don't tell anybody?
Well, that's really interesting, right? Because Mark knows how to say that, you know, and he doesn't here, but he is playing around with this other motif and theme, which is hardness of heart. So it could be. I don't know. I think it's interesting that he's trying to get something across to them, and they're not getting it. So sorry.
Do you think that's by design? You know, because of, you know, his grand entrance isn't there yet.
Right. Yeah, I do think Mark is building up to that. So, you know, Mark is written post-Easter. And so he's compiling the story in light of the Easter event. He knows the outcome. He knows the story. He knows what happened. I think he's trying to catch people up theologically and narratively to say, this is how we understand Jesus and the person of Jesus and the work of Jesus. And it's wrapped up in his signs and miracles. It's wrapped up in the prophecies. And it's wrapped up in his teachings. And they all make this story called a gospel. I want to just circle back with this idea about the manna thing, that there are parallels here as well. We will remember that when the Israelites are being provided for, right? The pillar of fire, the pillar of cloud. And Moses' biggest problem with them is that they won't shut up. They keep complaining. Manna again? Oh, how exhausting that all of our needs are provided for. Our daily bread, right? They are complaining. And then
He gives them for quail.
yeah, right? And then some of the complaints, like they are a stiff-necked people.
Yeah.
I just think that there's parallels here and echoes of the Old Testament that Mark wants us to hear and see.
Do you think he created the wind?
That Jesus did?
As another teachable moment?
Sure. Probably.
I don't know.
You're sitting there going, let's try this one.
Right? Yeah. It doesn't say so. I will say this about Mark, and this is really interesting. If we had time, we could do this, and I don't think we will. But if you read all the Gospels back to back to back to back to back, the Jesus in Mark is different than the Jesus in John. Like we're gonna keep reading, and in like the next couple chapters, Jesus heals a blind man, and it like doesn't work. He like tries to heal like his deafness and his dumbness, his muteness, and like it doesn't take. And he's gotta like do it again. But like in John, you know, Jesus is like, I mean, you think this guy walks on water. In John, Jesus is like everything's perfect because he's like the Son of God in John, and here he's the Son of Man. And so I don't think then that Mark would ever say he's capable of doing such a thing. I don't know. What else?
It seems to me that kind of goes back to that where he says, do not be afraid, because we fear what we don't understand.
Yeah.
And they're not understanding yet.
That's a really good insight and the connection between their fear, their hardness of heart, and what they're seeing. Yeah, they think he's a ghost.
But he got in the boat with them. Maybe he didn't want to get in because he thought he might have to. Well, he got in. Okay, and then maybe they made him row, and that was not a good day. He didn't want to row. Then he said, well, that's why he was gonna go past him. But he was in there with him. It's like, this is no ghost. This is the guy. This is the real deal.
Yeah.
Real deal. I mean, how lame were these guys? And, yeah, all this stuff they've done already. And they're going, yeah, I don't know. I mean, he walks on the water, you know, and he heals all these people. And he doesn't have it, who knows? He's probably,
I know.
He's not a real guy. He's not
you're
the real
right.
guy.
You're right.
And this goes on. I mean, you know, then Peter denies him.
Right.
You know, and it's like, oh, yeah.
So,
I'm not doing that.
yeah, why? So we've already talked this a little bit already, but Mark in theory could tell the story without the disciples, right? He doesn't need to include all these juicy tidbits of their stupidity, you know? But maybe he does it, right? Because we are the disciples. We would do the same thing. We do the same thing. They did that. Can you believe it? This is one of the evidence one of the things that people talk about. There's no way that some guy made all this up, especially the disciples, because it puts them in a terrible light. Like, why would you do this to yourself in the ancient world? Like, they're telling the truth.
You wonder why he went up to the mountain to pray, what he was praying about.
Yeah, it doesn't say, right? He's alone.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
We're gonna keep, go ahead, one more.
You know, talking about hardened hearts, I have friends, men, that I know well, whose hearts are totally hardened.
Mm-hmm.
They do not believe in God. They don't believe in Jesus. They don't believe in us. It's all a
Fairy
myth.
tale.
It is like a story that was told 2,000 years ago, and reading it now, at this point, I mean, they were actually observing this. They saw this, and still their hearts were hardened. When you think about how easy it would be today,
Oh, yeah.
and these guys go, I don't believe any of that. That's malarkey. It's a myth. You know, you believe that, but it's just not going to happen. Their hearts are hardened. What would it take to change that? I don't think that they will change in my lifetime or their lifetime, unless something cataclysmic happens, either to them, family, or the world, maybe. But they're not about to change. And they'll laugh. They go, "What do you believe in that for? I mean, that's stupid. You believe that." And these guys were there, and they're going, "I'm not sure I believe it." So
Same thing.
I think there's a sermon there.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
You know, that's powerful. It's a powerful observation. And
what is bad for me is that I care about these guys.
Yeah.
And it sometimes breaks my heart that they cannot see this. And we talk about this sometimes at length. And, you know, and I'm not a good person to do that, I don't think. I mean, I'm not educated enough. I'm not prepared to do that for them. But it just drives me crazy. I mean, these guys I care about. They are good guys. They're good men. They are not about to believe this ever. No way, no how. Ain't gonna happen.
I would push back on you a little bit, right? I would say no one's qualified for it. No one's educated enough. And then also you look at the disciples, they have no education. A bunch of fisher good old boys, you know, and they transform the face of the earth. And God can work miracles with just the smallest little mustard seed. And it's fascinating the parallels that we see in our lives with our friends who are hardened of heart, and how do we walk them into encountering the risen Christ in a powerful way that creates transformation in their life. And for me, it's never been, maybe for you it's very similar, it's never been like a planned event. I can tell you the times when I've seen people just like, they allow that conversation. Do you know what I mean? Like, two quick examples, and I will omit names because it's on YouTube. I was at a party for a workplace, and this person that my wife worked at the time, she knew I was a pastor, but that was it. And then it happened to be like a springtime party, and I was like, I got a really crappy week ahead. I was busy. You know, I got Monday, Thursday, Good Friday, Easter. Like I'm gonna be exhausted. And then she looked at me. She goes, Easter? I don't know what that is. This was in like 2018. You know, like I mean, this wasn't like 400. You know, so I was like, you're funny. Like you really like Easter. You know, she's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And then I felt in that moment, I was like, this is going to be an important conversation. Not in that I have to dress it up and get it all right, but here this person was saying, tell me about Easter. Oh my God. You know, like this is a moment for me to share. And you just have to say, oh, Easter is a time when we remember that Jesus rose from the dead. And then this person said, I don't know that story. You know, so I was like, oh my gosh, this is an opportunity, right? And I remember also sitting outside a bar in New Orleans with somebody else, won't share their names, and they were just said, like, they were just sharing a beer, right? And this person was like, so do you believe in God? And I was like, I'm a pastor. I think it's a prerequisite. And they were like, but like, you know, they thought about it, right? And they're like, but like, isn't like God violent, anti-homosexual, you know, a bigot, angry? I know I see all those Christians on the TV and they're upset all the time and angry. They're you know, is God like that? And it was.
Can be. Yeah. Can be.
Like it's this small. Well, it's this small little opportunity. Like they're asking, like, you believe in God? It's that conversation. So then I have friends who, their heart is calloused. They don't want to have the conversation.
No, I think it makes them uneasy.
Yeah.
Uncomfortable.
And then, like you said, something cataclysmic happens. And I'll share, no names here, this individual in my family, they're deceased now. I remember something happened in our family, and they showed up, and the first words they said to me were, I bet you never thought I'd be in a church again. It's like, and here we are.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Well, don't want to start the discussion tonight, but when you said, I'm a pastor, therefore I believe in God, I'm not sure that's always true.
Oh, come on now. Come on now.
I know. I mean, you know, we don't want to go there tonight. That can take a while.
I know.
But
Yeah, come on now.
You know,
Yeah.
and that's one of our issues, one of the problems we're having, I think. And let's not go there.
I know.
Let's save that to another discussion.
Well, and Jesus ran into the same thing. You're a teacher of the law and you don't know these things?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, always.
I knew someone that never went to church that I knew of, but on her deathbed, she changed, turned her life over to Jesus.
Yeah. Those are powerful moments.
Yeah.
Very.
Powerful moments.
Well, I don't want to take a lot of time, but.
You are.
No, it's good. The conversation's just
Listen, you know, one of my close friends that I cared deeply about, years ago his father passed, and I'm with him a few months later, and we're having hot chocolate, and he says to me and some other guys, you guys are Christians? And we said, yeah. And Pat goes, where's my dad?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, don't do this to me at 10:30 in the morning drinking chocolate. I'm not ready for that. And he said, my dad was a good man, but he didn't believe in Christ. He didn't believe in this. Now, we have had an ongoing conversation about this for years. A year or so ago, we were together. At 2:30 in the morning, we were talking about this. And he was getting very upset. And I said to him, I said, I know what I believe, and I don't want you to get angry about this because I believe the way I do and you don't. And so I don't want to lose you as a friend because you cannot believe what I believe. And I was really concerned because he was very upset. He became emotional about it. And so the next morning, this is 2:30 in the morning, at 6 o'clock the next morning, I had to take him to the airport. All the way to the airport, he's talking about this still. And I said, Pat, I just, this sort of believe. So we get at the airport and I help him get his stuff and I hug him and he says, pray for me. And I'm going,
He believes.
And here I thought I'd lost a friend.
Right.
And then he said, and I go, what, God, what am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah.
You know?
No, he's praying for him.
So
Yeah.
two small examples in the life of Christ that I think I just heard in that story. One is you think about the thief on the cross, right,
Yeah.
dying, and Jesus says, truly you'll be with me in paradise. That dude was not confirmed baptized in the Methodist Church. You know what I mean? Like, shame on you, Jesus.
But
He believes. And apparently for Jesus, faith goes a long way, right? And then I also hear Peter's words, I believe. Help my unbelief. So we're getting here. We're unpacking some of these really heart and hard themes. So the last few verses of this chapter says, when they had crossed over, they came to the land at Gennesaret and moored the boat. When they got out of the boat, people at once recognized him and rushed about that whole region and began to bring the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he went, into villages or cities or farms, they laid the sick in the marketplaces and begged him that they might touch even the fringe of his cloak.
Yeah.
Like that woman with the
Like
issue
the
of
woman.
blood. And all who touched it were healed. Were healed. We will continue to unpack these themes in Mark. I hope it's been life-giving for you all. I want to honor your time, make sure I don't have anything else to share. I think I'm good. Anything else for the good of the whole? Any other thoughts or questions? I will linger.
It just seems like it's going to take a lot, the way the world is now.
What's your name?
Yeah.
Denise.
Really, it makes you wonder where God is right now.
Yeah, I miss it.
Oh man, there's so much more to talk about, right? Like, where is God in the middle of the storm in the boat? He ain't there. Doesn't mean he doesn't care. And then he's there,
Yeah.
and he was just planning to walk by.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all these.
Right.
Yes,
Because
it's so good.
we were in a grocery store, talking to a lady, and she says, we were talking about all the bad stuff, she says, God, I know you got a plan, but we're gonna come out and use it. So, it just,
You know, when I'm praying and I'm with you on this war thing that you talked about Sunday, I keep saying, God, I know you're in control. Are we doing what you want? Is this your control?
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts on that, but we'll. Yeah.
But I do believe you can walk on water.
All right, I'm going to offer a prayer, and then I'm going to end the stream, and we can linger. All right. Woo! Lord, thank you for the story so far in Mark. As we continue to read it, we pray that we would encounter it new. Give us rest this evening. Help us to be people who have compassion on crowds and be responding to people's needs. That we would find ourselves in the middle of miracles like bread and fish and not be aware that you are working. Help us to have faith when life's storms come at us and we find ourselves doubting and our hearts becoming hardened. Lord, we pray that you would help our unbelief. We pray this all in your Son's name. Amen. Thank you, friends.
Nice to meet you.